Post 25 years of working experience, maybe the last period will make it 26. And it's been, a big part of that was spent in aviation and a big part in energy. So I've sort of flip-flopped between energy and aviation. I've also worked across 3 different sectors. So government, I held roles in the aviation industry and government. I also was the managing director of a parastatal. And of course, more recently, obviously I'm now in the private sector, but prior to this, I also ran the gas pipeline business, which was a 7 billion rand business, which Sasol operates. Yeah.
So quite a diverse background, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been a regulator, aviation regulator,
Yeah.
and now you're an operator. So it's very interesting to have both perspectives.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I was saying to Bruce Whitfield the other night that all of these different aspects have coalesced and is helping me in my current role. So, it's very difficult to run an airline if you don't understand the safety aspects, the commercial aspects. And one of the things that I am also very proud of is that I was part of the first phase of the privatization of the airports company, but I was also part of setting up the Civil Aviation Authority all those years ago. So, so it's safety, economic regulation, and of course, so it's been a broad
And you did a great
background.
job in those roles, by the way.
Thank you.
And now you're an operator. How does it feel to be an operator?
I'm not sure, what I prefer, but it's really very exciting, and it's one has to always look at what's happening in the competitive environment. But apart from that, we've obviously had a lot of issues also with our fleet, with labor issues. So it's very different, very varied, and one has to remember to always think long term, especially when it becomes quite busy. Yes. One can't take one's eye off the long term agenda.
Yeah, thank you so much. When you look at Comair over the years, all the years I've known it, and it's been around for about 75 years.
73 years?
73.
Yeah.
I've not known it all those years. Mm-hmm. But what I've noticed is that Comair focuses primarily on domestic SAA and perhaps a little expansion in the region, but not on a Pan-African level. So I don't know how important the Yamoussoukro decision or the SATM is to Comair. Do you think it can be achieved, number one? Will it benefit all the airlines, or will there be winners and losers among African airlines, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that's obviously a very tricky issue, but for as long as I can remember, Yamoussoukro and the unification of the African market has been a topic that has been under discussion. And I think certainly from a Comair perspective, we've operated in the Southern Africa region. But in order to enable the unification of the African market, there are a whole lot of things that have to be put in place. So we all need to have, there has to be the standardization of regulations and standards, etc. But in addition, there also has to be an authority that can deal with the competitive aspects. I think there's a lot of opportunity, but I just don't know that we have the political will, across the region.
So the political will may be lacking there.
I think it is fundamentally lacking.
Fundamentally lacking.
Yeah. So I think as all countries will have to come together, and we're going to have to do that. And there will be winners and losers, and I don't think anybody wants to be the loser. So.
And you are a former aviation regulator for South Africa. When we look at Africa with 54 plus jurisdictions, the African Civil Aviation Authority, AFCAC, has been charged with regulating or enforcing, implementing YD, and yet they have no enforcement powers. How can you introduce a policy if you don't have the ability to enforce the regulations? Should it have more teeth?
Well, so I suppose we're going to have to, if we look to other parts of the world, EASA has got probably a very similar situation to what
it
is
has power.
anticipated. Yes, and I think that is probably what we would need to put in place. Yeah.
right.
So it has to be a single regulatory authority. Right now, if airlines like ourselves want to operate anywhere in Africa, there's a huge, spectrum of rules and regulations, and they're all different, and so it does become quite difficult to operate across Africa. Yeah. So I do think EASA certainly has that's certainly a model that we can consider. Where it's a single set of rules and regulations with I suppose, with teeth. Yeah.
Of course, that's going to take time, isn't it? Really?
It's going to take time, but Nick, we've been at this for the last 20 odd years.
That's true.
So
that's very true.
So it's something that that has been. We've been talking about it for a very long time.
Sometimes I think we talk too much in Africa.
I think so.
And don't really achieve as much as we would wish. Let's look at Comair specifically. I mean, it's such a great airline. When I look at the founders of the airline, the chairman and the previous management over there and the boards, sterling characters, very focused, very non-political. To the best of my knowledge, British Airways Comair is the most successful franchise of British Airways and the most profitable over the years. Can you explain your success? What is the secret? What are other African airlines missing that you are doing so well?
Yeah, I couldn't. I was listening to Vianney when he was speaking. I think probably the difference with being a company which has got shareholding, where the shareholders, we need to focus on, what's in the best interest also of the shareholders. So we operate as efficiently as possible. We have to make sure that we focus on the market, so we can't take too long to make decisions. We have to take decisions quite quickly, and we have to certainly focus on making a profit. And so that is something that I think has been done fairly effectively to date.
Okay, thank you so much. Now let us turn to the Comair fleet. You were one of the Boeing MAX operators, and you had a tough decision to make a few months ago, should you ground or not. And I believe you grounded your single delivered Boeing MAX 8 before the CAA required it. That must have been a tough decision to make.
Yeah, it was incredibly tough. So I had been to Seattle to go and collect the aircraft, being the first, being the first of its kind, of its type to enter South Africa. And of course, it had been operating for about 1 week when the fatal Ethiopian accident occurred. And I remember very clearly that at about 12 o'clock that Sunday morning, I got an SMS from a colleague to say that Ethiopian Airlines has crashed. But I did not connect that it was a MAX aircraft at that stage. And probably about 10 minutes later, I got a call from another colleague to say, Wrenelle, I think you best be aware that it's a MAX. And then my phone didn't stop ringing. I think I was probably, doing a risk assessment up until about 10 o'clock that night to see what it was that we were going to do the next morning, because the MAX was going to be flying from Cape Town on the 6 o'clock service. And so it was really, really quite tough. So I consulted with the Boeing team, consulted with our chief pilot, with our technical people, with the CAA, did multiple consultations, and we came to the conclusion that there were no indications that the MAX aircraft at that time was unsafe to operate. I did, however, I phoned all of the airport managers that were going to be at the airport. In fact, I asked all the managers to be at the airport themselves, so that we could deal with any passengers that were going to be uncomfortable, that were going to refuse to fly the aircraft, etc. They were there. The aircraft departed. in fact, it did quite a few sectors on that day. And I recall walking into the office saying, I think that today we're going to see this aircraft being grounded, not for safety reasons, but because of pressure from our staff and our customers. But throughout the course of the day, we realized that we might have to take a decision to, we might have to take this difficult decision. So throughout the day we convened a safety review board, got all of the senior safety people across the business into a room, and then at around, we had ENCA parked outside our gate. They said they know that Eric and I were in that room. They were waiting until we came out. Anyway, but it was sort of in that time that we decided that we would in fact ground the MAX. And so of course it's a big decision because it's a very expensive aircraft. It's 750 million rand, in today's terms. Not having it in place had a huge impact. It was as part of our normal fleet renewal process. We had retired the 400, which we couldn't extend anymore. So it was really, really quite inconvenient to do. But we did it, I think, in the best interest of our customers. Did not want to fly the MAX, and I think our staff were also feeling unsettled. So we did it in the interest, I think, of ensuring that our passengers were comfortable.
And could you kindly tell us what have been the implications of the grounding, operationally, financially, morally, for the staff and for your passengers?
Yeah, I should just preface, before we introduced the MAX, we did take into account what happened with the Lion Air experience. So we had a lot of interaction, obviously, with Boeing on that. We had made sure that our flight safety, our training captains, they actually were in the simulator. They had done technical training so that they understood the aircraft. All of our crew were going to be trained in the classroom and online, so it wasn't going to be so it was quite an intensive, a number of intensive interventions that we had, in fact, put in place prior to introducing it into our service. But the net impact of it, of course, is that it's affected our product. So we've had to use wet leases.
Expensive.
Wet leases are twice the price that's increased our costs dramatically. In addition to that, it's reduced the efficiency of our own, our crew, flight crew, cabin crew. The fleet that we used to wet lease obviously had less seats, so it had an impact on revenue. So it hasn't been, a great experience. I am pleased to say, though, that during this difficult time, we have managed to improve our on-time performance quite substantially. So despite the tragedy or of the MAX, I'm very happy to say that we've certainly improved operationally.
Yeah, congratulations on that. But going ahead, you still have further challenges to make, major calls to make. For example, will the software patch, are you confident that the software patch proposed by the manufacturer will solve the problem? Are you sure that even if you bring the aircraft back into service, the flying public will have the confidence to fly with that product? So these are such major decisions.
Yeah, I think, so the first major decision was to ground the first MAX.
That's right.
A second major decision was that the second MAX was meant to come the next week, and we took the decision to delay, so we did not take delivery of the second MAX. So those were two quite big decisions. We obviously have two more that are meant to be coming in February and October next year. So they're sort of two more. So we should, see in the next period a fleet of 4, ultimately growing to 8. And I do agree, it's massive because we're going to have to make sure, first of all, that we're comfortable, and that we will do in consultation with all of the major international regulatory bodies. I think you know that today I think it's the 23rd today. We've got FAA, the Canadian authorities, the Chinese authorities. In fact, South Africa's there as well. And they're busy engaging with the FAA and Boeing on the new upgraded software, etc., etc. We've also already had 2 of our training captains go and fly the new software in Gatwick in the simulator, yes. And I think you know that, of course, Boeing has flown in excess of 100 flights, using the new software. I think this is going to be a global decision, that is imminent. I think we're expecting that we will have some feedback on that in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We have also been working, obviously, with Boeing and inside our organization on how we're going to reintroduce the MAX into our service once it has been given the all clear to operate.
In the meantime, are you looking for perhaps Dash 8s?
800s,
just as a standby?
Well, I should just say that right now we're in the process of just doing a full review of the fleet. Taking, so playing out different scenarios, because it's not, one doesn't know what's certain. There's obviously key uncertainties, and we're working on different scenarios for how we're going to deal with it in the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could help me on a financial point. Obviously, you had a lot of support from banks to finance the MAXes. So when you have to ground the aircraft for those type of reasons, do you continue paying?
Yeah, we continue paying, yeah. So we've obviously had to start repaying. So I think, obviously these we've had to put the pre-delivery, we've paid the pre-delivery payments, obviously, and then
for
we've
the
started...
deliveries?
No. We've paid it for the first 3, yeah.
Okay.
And then, of course, you have to, and part of that is financed from our own cash flow, and part of that is financed by the banks. And we're all in this together.
Yes,
but we're having to pay for those. We're having to pay the loans. Yeah.
We had a very fascinating presentation yesterday from a leading aviation lawyer, Mr. Paul Jebley. I don't know if Paul is here, but he gave a very fascinating presentation on the legal implications of the MAX situation, where the airlines have a right to abandon the contract. It's a very complex presentation, and I certainly want to email it to you.
I would appreciate that.
And perhaps give you his business card, because he's an expert in that. But have you ever thought, in all the discussions at the board level, of what you might do if you don't continue with the aircraft?
Yes,
your legal rights in some sense.
So we're considering all the different options.
Including changing types, for example.
Well, I don't want to go as far as that. Our next board meeting is on the 1st of July, the scheduled one. I mean, obviously we're having a special one on Tuesday, but our scheduled one happens on the 1st of July, so I wouldn't be surprised if the board discusses some of those options. But right now I can't say that is something that we will do.
So right now we're playing a waiting game to see the outcome of the development with Boeing on the patch.
We're looking at the different scenarios, yeah. So obviously one of it is to continue as is, then so there are different scenarios that we're currently considering.
How has this impacted your growth in terms of network? I know the MAX was going to be your flagship aircraft going forward. That's my understanding. So now it's been grounded, you're not taking deliveries. Has that stunted your ability to grow as you had wished?
Yes. I think, obviously we've had to cut back on certain routes because we just don't have, the aircraft available. And there's a certain point, where you've obviously got to do that wet lease versus schedule decision, So we obviously have we monitor the situation very carefully. We have had a very good relationship with leasing companies like Star Air Cargo, which is locally locally based, and they've really supported us over this very difficult time. But they operate 300s, fewer seats, so it's not ideal. But at least we've managed to keep flying.
I can understand you wet leasing in the short term, but over 3-4 months, are you looking for some dry leases of other types?
We have had quite a few offers that we are considering as well. Yeah.
Are you happy with the offers, the terms?
Well, I don't know what you've got in mind, Nick.
I think there's always room for improvement. Thank you so much. Turning to your fleet strategy or your network strategy, you've been very conservative. And in fact, there can be merit in being conservative, because I think in Africa you're one of the most conservative airlines from a network expansion point of view, and yet you've been the most profitable, consistently profitable. So there must be merit in that strategy. But going forward, with open skies coming into Africa, do you see yourselves extending your range within Africa at some stage?
Nick, we've considered various options. We've been in conversations with many different organizations, across the continent. And invariably, when you do the business case, it hasn't always made sense, and also just ease of operating, ease of business. And that is really what's also curtailed our growth. But obviously, well, we haven't taken those growth decisions. But obviously, our first strategy is to consolidate in Johannesburg, and then we've seen some really nice growth in the Southern African routes. And right now, we're also busy reviewing what some of the other possible options are. So we are busy looking at that.
Okay. One of the great achievements of Comair has been to diversify its revenue portfolio, to diversify even outside of the aviation industry. And you've been very successful at that. I believe 25% of your profits are from outside aviation. However, is there a danger that when you focus on non-aviation sectors, you may take your eye off the ball on the aviation side? How do you stop that happening?
Yeah, that has been a particular concern, because of course when you're starting up new businesses, they take a lot of time, and they do take one's eye off the ball. And I think to some extent we've seen the result of that in our on-time performance, which 6 months ago was in the high 60s. So there's been a lot of work to try and get the focus back onto the airline and onto the services. So I think that's something the board will obviously take into account as we go forward.
Okay. So you will ensure that you always keep the primary focus on your airline division?
Well, that is certainly my intention, and I think that is why Eric brought me in. Was to make sure that we do have that focus on the airline, because the other businesses are very small, and I think the airline still is still obviously the primary source of profit for the group. Yeah,
absolutely. I have several more questions, but because of time constraints, I would like to invite any questions, please, from the participants for Wrenelle Stander, the Executive Director of the Airlines Division of Comair Limited, South Africa, the most successful airline in Africa from a profitability point of view. It's a rare opportunity to ask Wrenelle any questions.
This type of airline, and in this case British Airways, Kulula is our role model, if I may say. We'd like to go in that direction. One of the biggest problems we have is human resources, people. And I've had many years in Africa, in many different countries, and one of the best things we have is raw material. We have young, kids that come from these schools that are not always, at best. We always feel that when we take them from school, we need to give them a gap here, so they, so they bridge with what our standards are expected, and then we have to go through some training, and and all this story of drainage. The Middle East is requiring a lot of people for growth, and I'm not talking about pilots only, but pilots, of course, is one of them. Mechanics, flight dispatchers, etc. What is the plan? I mean, what is it being done, and what kind of pressure, as a private operator, you can do to get this going on without having the burden of financing this cost of training that's extremely high?
Mm-hmm. Sure. That is a very good question, and a question that we grapple with on a regular basis. To try and find people to obviously in our flight crew, cabin crew, that's been fairly stable. Touch wood. In the area of our sort of operations department, that's been stable. Where we've struggled to attract people has been in our commercial space. So it's taken us almost 3 years to recruit a chief commercial officer. We out on the market again. We've in fact had to bring in international people to come and deal with issues like analytics. And revenue management, so it's quite a there just are no local skills or not enough available. So we've certainly had to recruit externally. We have started external outside of the country, so we've had to bring people in. What we have now started is where we bring in graduates with financial and training in those areas. We bring them into the business, and we're working with them to try and grow into the future leaders within the group. Having said that, I'll just use the opportunity to also advertise the fact that we do have an aviation training academy, which offers flight crew, cabin crew, and other training. And it might just be that we need to also look at some of the commercial aspects in relation to training. I think as the industry grows, and Vuyani spoke a little bit about customer experience, but you can't really do the customer experience piece without being digitally enabled. So there's a lot of work within our environment going into being more digitally enabled, to ensure better self-service options, but also just to get to know the customer. We're spending a lot of time on analyzing the data that we're seeing. So there's a lot of data, but we never actually use it to analyze. So there's quite a big focus also on analytics in our environment. But there are very few people that that can do it, and the people that there are just overwhelmed because suddenly across our airline, everybody's looking for data and for the analysis of the data. So I haven't answered your question except to say I agree.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jao, the CEO of LAM Mozambique Airlines, for that excellent question. And thank you, Wrenelle, for handling that so well. In closing, and I wish we had more time, Wrenelle, we have a hall full of lessors, financiers, all wishing to do business with you and other leading airlines. What would you wish from them if you had a wish list?
I think the wish list obviously would be the cost of the leases, So, it boils down to that ultimately. So if there's some good deals in the room, yeah, sure.
Should they queue up outside to meet you?
Well, I'm actually going to be leaving because I'm flying out to London this evening,
right.
to go and see our British Airways mainline partners, yeah. So
yes,
I
I'm just
won't be
joking.
able to.
I know that if they wish to contact you, they will directly.
So I think they know who to contact. It's Keith Watson,
Yes,
who
Keith.
is our
Yes.
executive manager that looks after our fleet.
Yeah.
And by this evening, he will know exactly what some of our requirements are. Don't tell him I told you.
Yes. And just one final question. You had formed a partnership, an MRO partnership, to look after the MAXs. Is that on hold now?
No. In fact, we launched that yesterday.
You did, really?
Yes.
That shows confidence.
So the Lufthansa Technical will also take over. So for the rest of this year, every month we should be taking delivery of 800 leases.
Okay.
And the first one's already come in. Zulu Whiskey Whiskey has already arrived, and we're expecting one every month. So they will take over the line maintenance of the new 800 fleet and the Maxes
But
going
of course,
forward.
you'll still work with South African Airways Technical. on that,
Absolutely.
which
yeah.
is really, really good. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much for that. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I really do believe that Wrenelle Stander deserves a warm round of applause. You know, in all the years I've had the pleasure and privilege to know you, to observe you, I believe you have just been so hardworking, so focused, so knowledgeable in all you do. And once again, you have commanded the respect everywhere you have worked within the industry and outside the industry. So congratulations to you. It's a great achievement, by the way. And we are watching you and the company, of course, in the days ahead, in the months ahead, with the change of leadership. And of course, we always wish Comair every success, continued success. And hopefully, we look forward to having a further update in the future from you. So thank you so much. Let's give Wrenelle another round of
Thank you,
applause.
Nick.
Thank you.